It's trying to start it. We're starting. There we
We
go.
are live.
We are live. So, hello. You, of course, know who I am, and I know who you are. It's not. We've known each other for how long now? It's been a few years, right?
Yeah, it really has been a few years, which is pretty incredible. You're one of my longer internet friends, which I love.
I know, I love that too. And hopefully we'll finally be meeting in October in my birthday month, because that would be awesome.
Down in Atlanta. I'm all about it. I'm so excited.
I know. I've only driven through Atlanta, so now I have to actually go there because I feel weird. Yeah. I've driven through it to go to school.
Yeah. You have a pretty good excuse to go there, though. I mean, come on now.
Yeah. Soul Sisters down there. I have to go down there. I don't have a choice.
Yes. Well, I'm seriously so excited.
There we go.
I am seriously so excited to be able to have a chance to chat with some of your Dream On Youth community and talk a little bit more about Self-Worth Wednesday and all those really fun things. So thank you for having me on here.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for saying yes. And because I know it was kind of like spontaneous, and I was like, hey, by the way,
I'm doing a thing. Do you want to do the thing with me? I like the thing, so I will do the thing.
Exactly. So for those who don't know, this is Kayla Hollatz, my soul sister. She's been with Dream On Youth community for, oh goodness, for a very long time.
Almost since the start. Almost since the start. Yeah. I know you had it for a little while before I had known about it. But yeah, I have been through a lot of the transitions, which is really fun.
Yes, and you watched us grow, and you've been there since the start of Self-Worth Wednesday. I do know that.
Mm-hmm.
So you've seen it from its very, very little beginning stages to now it starting to grow a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we will get on the questions, I promise. Of course, the first question I'm going to ask is for you to introduce yourself to everybody. Okay. Because we all want to know who Kayla Hollatz is, and not how the world perceives you or how you believe society is see you, but just who you are down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like that's a really big question. I'm going to try to do it justice as much as I possibly can. So professionally, really what I do is I help creative business owners with building community-centered brands. And so that's been something that has been such a huge part of my life, and a huge reason I think why we met too, because my heart is really grounded in community, and it's the reason why I do what I do. And I'm so lucky to now be able to do it full-time on my own, which I totally adore. But really, I guess, thank you very much. I guess, as a person, I definitely have always been a very multi-passionate person. So I definitely believe that, we have lots of different facets of ourselves. So there is a part of me that, is totally entranced by poetry. I know that's something that you and I connect on a lot of the time because we both are poetic souls for sure. And so I have a poetry collection called Brave Little Bones, and definitely have thought about doing some more in the future too. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I'm just a huge, yes, I love passion projects, everything passion projects. But I'm also really, really big into, passion projects. Anything that I can get my hands on that's really going to allow me to just creatively play is really important to me. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you and I connected on such a deep level in very, very early stages of our friendship, is because we both want to do all the things, but we still do them very purposefully too, because we want to make sure that we're leaning into our creativity.
Yes, very much so. That's one of the many reasons why, yes, we do connect on a much deeper level than I think when I first started doing Dream On Youth and started doing Self-Worth Wednesday than I was ready for, because I was very, how you are with poetry. It's very you're this is my little thing, and this is my little sacred thing, and I don't know if I'm ready to put it out into the world yet. And so you get a little scared that nobody's going to like it or nobody's going to appreciate it. But when you're doing it for you and really leaning into it and trusting that, hey, maybe it's not for everybody, but somebody out there is going to connect.
Exactly. And, one of the really powerful things that I've heard from a few different artists is that, when you're creating something, the root of it, it has to be created for you. You have to create it for yourself in order to even do it justice, because your self-expression is so incredibly important, I think, for creatives, especially just to your sanity. But then I think what the really powerful thing is again, like sharing it out into the world, allowing other people to add their perspective to it. And I think that's when something creative really becomes art, is when other people are able to add in what they think, look at it through different lenses. And I know that's really what happened with my poetry collection, because surprisingly, a lot of my business friends actually were extremely supportive of my poetry collection and bought it themselves. And they wouldn't be what you would consider like poetry people necessarily, you know, like they're not used to reading poetry. I think the last time some of them have read poetry was like in grade school. But it really was cool to have their eyes kind of be open to what poetry can look like. And it doesn't just have to rhyme. It doesn't just have to have meter. You know, it can be free verse. It can be like just soul opening. But at the same time, I really learned a lot through that process too, because I was able to learn about how other people perceived my work, and certain hidden things that I had within, and what they found of themselves kind of within the pages, which to me is the most powerful thing of, I think, creating a book.
Right, of course, which is why I want to create a book too. I'm ready. I think I'm ready. Well, I guess it's a tall order to say.
Ready.
As ready as I'm ever going to be. But so I know you've been with our community, like I said, for a very long time, probably since near the beginning, if not the beginning, because I do think I stumbled across, this is funny because it was before I think I emailed you, and I was looking for something and I stumbled across like where you had sent in for an application, I think, and I was like, I forgot all about that. Like,
yeah, so that's an interesting part of this story too, because when we met, I was in college and I was kind of looking for different internships, and I know that I had applied to be a part of Dream on Youth. And I know at that point, you definitely had your fill of people, but I know you were like, you know, let's stay in touch. Let's make sure that we can connect with each other to see if there is like some opportunity for collaboration or something, you know, down the line. And it's just been so great because now, you know, like I just completely see you as like, just again, a soul sister, like just a very, very good friend. And it never would have happened if I wouldn't have kind of like put myself out there and said like, hey, and it would have been, I mean, in a way, it would have been kind of easy for me to be like, well, that opportunity didn't work out. So whatever, I'm just going to go do my own thing. But that's not who I am. And that's not how I look at opportunities. So I'm really glad that, you know, we both were able to still keep in contact with one another. And I was part of the Dream on Youth family, you know, of course, for this whole time. So I'm just really glad with how everything kind of worked out too, because that also allowed me to have a lot more time to focus on my brand and where I wanted to grow what I was working on. So everything works out.
It did. It worked out beautifully.
Yes, so, as, you know, as we can say.
Yes, it'll work out more beautifully when we finally meet, but you know.
I know.
We got a few months before that.
It's coming.
Okay. And so, of course, Self-Worth Wednesday, for those who are watching and don't know, is all about celebrating people individually as they are. Well, at least in my opinion is. But what does Self-Worth Wednesday really mean to you personally?
Yeah. So Self-Worth Wednesday, of course, the biggest root of that is like self-worth. So I think in order to understand like Self-Worth Wednesday and the movement in general, you really have to understand what self-worth means to you. And at the time that we had connected, and I was, so Self-Worth Wednesday, the hashtag really started, I remember, it was a weekly thing, right? So you did it for like a year. It was like for 52 weeks, you were going to share something that you loved about yourself. And I actually, before we jumped on this call, I decided to look back at the hashtag just to see my own posts, just to see how they kind of changed. It was interesting. I started off with posts, you know, and like selfies and certain things saying like, I really like my hair, or my eyes look really green today. And then it really transitioned into these cool photos where I was doing close-ups of different features of mine that I had always been really kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say like ashamed, but they're not necessarily the ones that I would highlight or be like, yeah, I really like this feature about me. But it was like I have very dark hereditary, dark circles under my eyes. And so it's always been something that I've like tried to cover up and all of that too. And my mom has struggled with it more than I even have. But yeah, I remember taking a photo and feeling like it was a gorgeous photo, even though it was a close-up and like you could totally see my dark circles. And I shared that. So I think, again, that's just like one example, but I really liked seeing the transition of like self-worth has to be like, oh, the pretty things, the things that I think are really great, to like, oh, these are the things that are not necessarily what I would highlight, but they make me me. And so that's a really important thing. And also just realizing that the things that you kind of zero in on are never the things that other people do. I mean, the people who you surround yourself with, they're going to find the beauty in you, even in the dark circles, or what I feel like is my large forehead. And I know you've talked about that before too. Yeah. So I know we're always like, oh my God. I cut my forehead off all the time, like on all my Snapchats and all my photos, I always cut it off. But you know, then you'll get photos where people take like a normal shot of you, you know, like this, and you'll end up finding like, oh, I really like that shot. So there's always a way to feel beautiful. I think you just have to look within yourself and accept the way that you are. And you know, I had a lot easier time, honestly, doing that in college. I went through a really great stage when I met you, where I was really about self-love and self-worth. And it got a lot harder once I got out into post-grad life, and I put an extra emphasis on work. I mean, I've always definitely been very work-centric, but I think sometimes it's easy to let that self-care kind of go to the wayside. But I think, you know, now I'm really trying to get it back, especially now that I'm working for myself. And I know that if I don't do it for myself, then I'm not going to be the best leader that I can be for my clients, for my readers, for anybody who's connecting with me, really.
Right. Of course. Well, because you define it that way, are there any core values that you take away from Self-Worth Wednesday, or anything that helps you with your own self-care practice? I know that it's harder now that you're a full-time entrepreneur and you're trying to like balance like all your calls, because I know you have a lot of coaching calls and like blog posts and like podcasts, and you've got a lot going on.
Yes, I do have a lot going on. And I think the only thing that really sometimes can keep me sane is doing things kind of in batch days. And for those of you who are listening who may not know exactly what that is, it basically means blocking off certain days for certain tasks. So when I first started, especially when I was trying to juggle it with a full-time job, I mean, I was doing everything kind of all in like one night, you know? So I was doing podcast episodes, and I was doing blog posts, and I was doing calls with other people just for fun. And it was just like, it was too much for me to like switch my brain to like, oh, I have to write and be calm now, to like, oh, I have to turn it on and be like, you know, my enthusiastic, like my natural enthusiastic, like really fun self on a call, even though, you know, like regardless of who you're talking to, you know, like too much of the calls and that kind of stuff can definitely drain you, I think, no matter who you are. So yeah, I just really like being able to put all of my calls in one day. So I can say, okay, this is a coaching call day. I'm going to be on it, and it's going to be really great. But then I'm not going to have them go too late into the night, so I can really make sure that I'm doing something on my own. So I don't ever schedule to go to events or anything after coaching calls, because I just need to be with myself, reading, journaling, doing something. But then there are days where, you know, I have to block it off for writing, because writing is, I'm sure, you know, as a writer yourself, like the muse does not always come to you. So if you can get her down on the page, it's a really, really good thing. So that's why I like to block off specific days just for her to try and come. But it's so hard to like wrangle her back in sometimes. But you got to get it done. You got to get the stuff done regardless.
This is true. The muse does not listen. You have to like entice her to come back.
I know. And I know we've talked before about Big Magic, which is a book by Elizabeth Gilbert that I think is just recommended reading for just any human being, really. But yeah, she talks a lot about that aspect of like how inspiration comes to you. Yes. Big Magic. I actually just put it away today, so I don't have it with me, so we can't be like Big Magic twins right now, but that's okay.
Yes, but I definitely identify with Big Magic. I know because you had a Create Lounge chat the other night about in the book club that, and I originally, I don't think I was able to go to that because I think I had something else. I was supposed to do something else, and I like cleared my day for it. I was like, no, I'm going, because Big Magic it changed the game this year. I've been reading a lot more books that like seem to just change the game for me and just kind of break up my relationship with certain like words, certain ideas that I've had for myself, ignore the headboard in the background. You know, that one, of course, it says creative living beyond your fear. But my biggest thing was like, oh, it's probably going to make me so much more fearless when I read it. And then like, as I was reading it, I know I got to that one point where she was talking about not being fearless and like kind of like living with fear and not so much kicking to the curb and everything. So that's why I'm really, now my word is like, I'm throwing fearlessness out the window because I don't want to think about it that way where I'm like, I'm not gonna be scared, because actually, which is really funny because I feel like it should be the exact opposite, is that like when I start writing things down or I start just like dreaming really big, and I know we've talked about that 500 things I want in life challenge and like writing all the big scary dreams down, and we're like, who wrote that? That's my alter ego. And then, you know, during those moments, usually my foot is anxiously bouncing, which I know is totally fear, but fear is also excitement. And I think just knowing who you are and what you want in life and like actually putting it down on paper is so much different than just thinking it and dreaming it. And even if you don't take action just yet, it's there in front of you and you're going to keep thinking about it because you wrote it down. It's sitting right there.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that this conversation right now is really, really important, because that's another reason why I totally love this book too, is because she really talks about like, you can let fear be inside the car, but you can't let it drive, right? So like put it in the back seat and let it be there. It'll whisper in your ear. And I think that's the important thing too, is like, I just don't think it's really possible to be fearless, because that means taking all fear out. And there are some fears that you have in your life that actually do kind of protect you. So it's not that all fear in life is totally bad. It's just, if the fear is keeping you from doing what you want to do, and it's really just like either internal, you know, self-inflicted, or it's external, like you got to kick that to the back seat, you know, like maybe not kick it to the curb and like leave it there forever. But like you have to be able to learn kind of to live with it. And so I think the book is really more so about learning to live with it in your life, but not letting it control you, and rather like you controlling it and having the confidence and the power to say like, I hear you, like to your inner critic, but I'm going to do this thing anyway.
Right. Especially, and I know all of us struggle with inner critics, creatives especially, but I know everybody in the world struggles with an inner critic that is like, you really think you're going to do that? You're not going to do that. I'm not going to let you do that. You can't do that. You're not good enough for that. And, you know, it's that like repeating like thing, even if it's like something that you had like forgotten that you were scared to do when you were younger, things like you're like, I'm grown up now. I'm probably not going to think about that. Like, and it comes back, and like fear likes to bring up those things, and that inner critic likes to bring up those things that like you would try to push back because you're like, I'm trying to think about that because I'm trying to get on with my life. But I mean, I think that's the biggest problem, is that we try to live fearlessly and try to ignore it and keep things in the dark, when really they, besides the fact that they do protect us, like you said, that they can actually spark something new. Because if you're scared that, I can't do this on my own, maybe you need to reach out to somebody to get help. And that's not a bad thing. Everybody needs help. Trust me. The girls are texting me. I know I need help because they're texting me. Like, it's, I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure that, it's to ask for help and to be afraid and stuff like that. That doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you are not capable of doing anything. It just means, hey, you're human. Like, that's it.
Just own it, right? And I think a great way to kind of tie it back to self-worth again then is just that, you know, when you have, you know, whenever you're creating something, like just knowing that you are worth it and you can take up space. And not only that, but like what you create can take up space. You're allowed to put pen to paper. You're allowed to put a paintbrush to a canvas. You're allowed to do anything you want to do. Also, regardless of what the final result is, you don't have to live for that like final result, for the next big thing, for any of those things. You can do what you want to do just because you enjoy doing it. And to me, that's like where the most power comes from, is when I can completely let go of what something is supposed to look like, or supposed to be, or supposed to let me do, and just do what I want to do.
Beautiful. All the applause right there. And then of course, with Self-Worth Wednesday, because I know I like to say this a lot about like to tell people, like, what would you tell your younger self if you could? What would you tell young Kayla if you could? It doesn't matter if it was like a year ago, or if it was like when you're really little. If there's something that you really wish like you would have like thought about yourself or had the confidence or anything like that.
Yeah. So like right as you said young Kayla, the specific age I went kind of like back to in my mind was 9th grade. And the reason why is because that's when I needed self-worth the most. I was going through very intense physical and verbal bullying and cyberbullying. So it was also kind of coming with me at home. And it was just like the most like earth-shattering time for me. And I think high school is just a really hard time no matter kind of who you are. But I had a really hard time because I was constantly kind of picked on for my height, for my weight, for just a lot of things that I personally could not control. And so I really needed self-worth at that time. And so the things that I would probably tell myself is that like, you need to focus instead of like on what you look like everybody else is telling you to focus on. You need to focus on being the best person you can be. And it sounds really cheesy, but it's so true, because if you put half of that energy that you care about like what you look like and stuff, if you put half of that energy into actually like doing something amazing for the world, doing something amazing even for yourself, like, and again, that's not selfish to do that either. Self-care is really important. Like, you're going to be so much better off. And then you're going to really start to not look at things as, you know, things need to be perfect. I love the cat that's over there. He's totally interrupting my flow. I know.
I was like, really?
I love it. But yeah, I mean, again, you gotta, like the cat is showing there, like you gotta own your roar. Like you gotta own the thing that's within you. And that's gonna be way more important than like how I look in a bikini or how I look walking down the halls. It's just how it is.
Exactly. I know. You just like totally messed up the flow, Peanut. This is live. I can't change that. That just happened. You gotta roll with the punches, right?
That's the great thing about live conversations, though, is that it's like unfiltered and it's authentic, it's real, in the best kind of way possible. And yeah, cat or not.
No, cat or not. But as far as, because like we were talking, the Self-Worth Wednesday is really not like just our community. Like we really want to make it a much broader conversation and bring more people in. I mean, of course, like once you like commit to Self-Worth Wednesday, of course you're part of the family. We're going to love on you anyway, even if you're not like claiming the hashtag. But how have you seen over the years since you've been with us for a while, it affect our community and kind of change the conversation for us?
Yeah, so it's been interesting because I know there were some people, like especially early on when I was using it pretty religiously and actually posting every week, there were a lot of people that would ask, oh, like what is Self-Worth Wednesday? And again, I think that's where any movement starts, is using something, believing in something, standing up for something publicly and showing up, and somebody out there is going to ask about it that needs it, like that really truly needs it. So I remember there was a gal specifically who was a Tumblr follower of mine for my poetry blog at the time. And like, she definitely was in just like this really difficult kind of depressive state in her life. And, you know, I definitely was trying to help as much as I possibly could with that. But, you know, through posting some of those updates, and I think especially when I started to share things about myself that I didn't necessarily like inherently like, but things that I was going to find beautiful and was working on, and those sorts of things, and kind of showing that I was a work in progress myself, she started to say like, oh, what is this? Can I jump on? And I remember her sharing a few of the photos, and just her being able to share those selfies, like it doesn't always come naturally to people. Like for me, I am kind of like an internet child, so I don't really mind like sharing like my face. I don't mind sharing my poetry. I don't mind sharing a lot of things. But I think it's a really good reminder that it's not as easy for everybody to do that. So when you're able to kind of extend that olive branch and show up in your way so they can show up even in a small way in theirs, that's just the amazing thing, I think.
Right, especially because I think that's the thing that we don't like necessarily think about when we create these hashtags. You're going to interrupt again, aren't you? You're going to mess up the whole flow. Okay. She's like sitting right there. But that we necessarily don't, like, we think, oh yeah, like it's going to bring our community together and stuff like that, but we don't necessarily think about like all the people, first of all, that are around us, like locally and like at home, that like are actually paying attention. Because I know my mom has like reposted things and like said things, or like I've had friends that have noticed it, like my best friend Caitlin, and they don't necessarily like post on like about Self-Worth Wednesday, but they'll repost something that I did, or they'll actually talk about it personally to me. And it's just something you don't think about until it happens, and you're like, oh, this is why this conversation is important, because I'm not just helping like this person that's way out here and this person that's way over there, but I'm helping people that are at home and that I also like really, really love and really, really care about.
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
changes how you talk to them, even like how you can identify with them, because they'll start to bring up stuff that you never even knew they were going through or never even thought they would ever go through.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, like I think the big thing about this too is that Self-Worth Wednesday is not just about like having self-worth on Wednesday. It's more so like having a specific day where you can call out like what you are either struggling with, or the things that, you know, you're starting to see worth in yourself. And again, I think an important thing too is, I know we've talked, and especially I've talked a lot about like the physical stuff, just because that's something that I personally have struggled with, but it can also be like all of the internal things too, like that inner critic we were talking about. And a lot of that stuff that comes out, like that's a huge part of self-worth too. Like we need to tell ourselves that we're worth it on all levels of our life too. So I think having a dedicated day like Wednesday, especially since Wednesday is Create Lounge Day, so I love it. It's just like all the good vibes on Wednesday. It's also kind of like what you need to kind of get over the hump of that week too. I think a lot of things kind of boil up in Wednesday and then kind of like calm down a little bit. So I just think it's awesome.
I know. So I'm going to do something unconventional, because I don't think we've ever asked this question in our Self-Worth Wednesday interviews. I mean, I know we talk about this a lot on our like Twitter feed and stuff like that, but I am going to ask that because, you know, a lot of people will talk about the pretty parts of it, like we were saying like earlier, like actually showing the pretty things on the internet. But are you still struggling with things like comparison and doubt and with self-care and self-love now? Because I think a lot of people think like, I'm never going to get there. And then it's something that's like, you know, like it's a step that we get to, or a finish line that we cross, even though I think it is, it's like more like a progress. And it's like, you may not get over everything, because everybody's going to have a bad day every once in a while. I don't care if you're Queen of Sheba, you're going to have a bad day. It's just going to happen. But do you still struggle with things like that and making sure that you're taking care of yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely struggle with those things. And, you know, a part of me has been kind of down on myself, because I actually used to be in a much better place than I am now. And so I think giving yourself that grace in order to have some time to heal, and not expecting yourself to heal in a certain kind of timeline, to me, self-worth looks a lot like that right now, is giving myself some time to heal from things and not expect myself to be at a certain pace if that's not where I am. But I definitely think in the online world, especially since I am an online business owner, and I mean, I do have the most incredible community, and I'm pretty surprised, yet extremely flattered with how much it has grown. But I think anytime you really put yourself into a position where you are community leading, you are connecting with so many crazy talented people, and especially people who are talented in other areas than you are. So it's kind of natural to compare yourself to people just because you're so surrounded by people. And again, I think it's kind of like the fear where it's always kind of going to be there. You can't think that you're going to run a community and not think about how somebody else is talented in a certain area and how you kind of wish that you could be and stuff. But the biggest thing that I've learned is to really look at what that jealousy is trying to tell you, right? So if I'm feeling jealous of the way that somebody does something, I want to say, okay, what is reflected in that I want? Like, what does that show me about my desires? Am I seeing that they are traveling and they're getting to do all of these different things? What does that tell me about myself? Like, do I want to be able to go out and do those things? Or is it more so that I want the flexibility? Maybe it's not that I want to go travel the world and, you know, drop everything that I own to go do it. Maybe it's more so I like that freedom. I like that flexibility. How does that look like in my normal life? So it really helps me to put some things in perspective. And I think it's really the way that I can just stay sane as a community leader, because I want to make sure that I am showing up in the best kind of way possible. And I always make sure that I share those things too, so people don't think that, you know, I'm completely void of comparison and nothing affects me because I'm a leader. Like, no, like I'm human too. And I think it's important to show people that, you know, things that they may think that we, you know, both of us, you know, as community leaders, things that they don't think that we struggle with. Of course we do. We maybe just have a different way of looking at it and dealing with it. And then that can maybe help other people in return.
Exactly. I know that's what we were talking about. I think the other night we were talking about how like we, as far as community leaders, like there's a lot of things like comparison is definitely going to happen. That's just something you're never going to get away from. I don't care where you live in the world, unless you live under a rock and there's nothing in there under the rock. And you still might be like, where was I? And then you might start comparing yourself to your old self. So, you know, you're just never going to get away from it. And it's one of the things like fear that we can't let so much, like, it's not that we have to kick it to the curb. It's just got to sit in the backseat with fear. You got to scoot over fear. It's got to sit back there with you. And we might see the comparison, but like you said, flipping it and having that conversation. Okay, what am I actually jealous of? What am I actually comparing myself to? What do I want that they have? And I think that's a really good way to look at it. And that will actually help a lot of people, because I feel like people are like, I need to stop comparing. And so they try so hard to stop. And then it's just like, it just like,
you just got to look at what it's trying to tell you, because like you're comparing for a reason. There's something that your internal voice is trying to tell you. So instead of, like either trying to cut it out completely or just like keep letting the noise in, like try to silence it a little bit and figure out exactly why. I know I have a few journal prompts that I've created for myself that have really helped me with this. And I think it's just being very self-aware. Like to me, I think that's one of my best qualities. And at the same time, like sometimes it can be a huge weakness of mine too, because I can be too aware to where it leads me to like doubt myself like crazy. But at the same time, I do believe that the root of self-awareness is a very good thing to have, because even if you may have tendencies to overanalyze, you still are getting at the root of everything. And I think it's really important just to make sure that you're aware of how you feel, how things look for you, and what you want things to be like. Because otherwise, like, how are you going to move forward?
Exactly. You can't move forward if you never even look back. I mean, it's not good to dwell on the past, but like you can't learn if you're like so busy like trying to forget what just happened. It doesn't work that way. Life does not work that way.
Exactly. I think sometimes we kind of try to compartmentalize things as like, this is a separate thing from this thing, but really so much of our life is like a very fluid thing. So I think keeping it as, you know, you're kind of looking at the whole mosaic of everything rather than like the little pieces of it. And that's something that's really helped me. Right.
Because our entire lives are a masterpiece in the making. We just have to, absolutely. I mean, everybody's is going to look different. So, and then of course, the last question, I can't talk. Did you notice that? I can't talk at all. Any words of advice for anyone that's watching? Of course, because this will be on the blog. Anybody that's going to read, you know, little excerpts or out there fighting the world or trying to fight the world on their own. Any advice for them?
Yeah, first things first, like find your community, and that can mean online, that can mean locally, that can mean anything that it needs to. But I think the root of what you said is, you know, for people who feel like they're kind of going, you know, out on their own. And the main thing that community shows you is that you're not, is that everybody else is struggling with the same things that you are. Everybody else is trying to get through the day, trying to get things figured out. And you're not the only person that's going out there. So I think it can be not only gratifying, but it can be extremely humbling. And I think humility is an extremely important, like, quality for us to have as humans. And I also think it teaches us a lot about vulnerability. Like, I know it's a very, very hot topic right now, but it is because it's a really important one, of just allowing yourself to be open about other things. And like you were saying before, like having the strength to ask for help. For me, I feel the most boss when I allow myself to feel the things that I've been pushing away and allow myself to ask for help when I need it. It's not something that comes easily to me by any means, but it's something that's really important. So I guess all of those things kind of together is just allowing yourself to be loved by other people as well as accepting the love for yourself. Beautiful. Yep. That is definitely a quotable moment. Yay! I'm glad I ended on that then. Well, thank you for agreeing to this and opening up and having this really organic conversation, because it actually, like, I of course had a list of questions that are over here and it like kind of like, it's funny to see like where I was wanting the conversation to head, and then like see like where I had some questions later that we actually talked about sooner, and I'm like,
Okay. I do know my soul sister very well. I did see where that was
Absolutely.
going.
Yes. And I mean, like, I had to bring big magic into this at some point, because I feel like I do with like all my interviews, just because I think there's so much goodness in it too.
Oh, there's totally goodness in it. We're probably a little biased because we love Elizabeth Gilbert, but everybody has to read the book. If you're watching this, you have to read the book. Yeah, you got to read the book. I'm sorry. We're gonna bully you into reading the book. Not really. We're just advising that you read the book. Actually, read the book. Okay. Well, thank you so much for anybody watching this and listening to us talk. And I just happy Self-Worth Wednesday the next time that actually rolls around, because this will probably won't be posted till Sunday.
Yes. Happy Self-Worth Wednesday. And thank you so much for having me, Cydney.
Oh, you're so welcome, Kayla.